Hello, I'm Tyler Gatcham.
I'm Jack Nocetta.
I'm Max Cypher.
And I'm Jake Carlson.
And welcome to Polidics.
Week 2.
Today's topic, the Democrat dilemma. So boys, who are you supporting?
Hillary.
Bernie.
I'm trying to debate it out.
You're trying to get those words out?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'll have to say. Hopefully this conversation will help elucidate.
All convincing.
Tyler, I think you have the most interesting view on this.
Well, I want Bernie as much as the next millennial, but I do like Governor Kasich. Mm-hmm. I'm a fan.
Sell out.
That is interesting.
It's
That is interesting.
Now, Tyler, I'd like to start with just what makes you skip the next almost logical step. You would think it would go Bernie, Hillary, and then Kasich.
Kasich to me has almost had one of the most defined stances of the entire race. I think on either side, he came out with a message of, this is community, we're going to rebuild community, and he had a quote that I really liked where he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, we need to be Americans before we're Democrats and Republicans. And I thought that's really important. I think the country is incredibly divided at this point in time. I think to have a president coming in on a cooperative stance is a very important concept. So that's the main reason I would support him. I also like a lot of what he said about dealing with North Korea. I like the way that he's talked about the Middle East. I think it's been the most honest and the most direct. Other than, on the Republican side, we'll carpet bomb them. We should kill their families. That'll teach him a lesson. Kasich is definitely coming on a much more, we can handle this in a safe way, in a way that more innocent lives won't be lost. So I really appreciated that.
Well, I will say though, some of his, especially during the debates, some of his Obama bashing commentary, I don't think makes him quite the poster boy for nonpartisanship.
Yeah, no, I would second that, but relatively speaking,
Another interesting note though is he's very much an establishment candidate, and whether or not the people right here might want that experience or would reject that, like we see a lot of millennials doing, he certainly fits the description. I think we could agree on.
Yeah, but again, him versus Hillary for me. Hillary is also establishment. So if you're going anti-establishment, which I think has its perks, but it definitely...
Sure, yeah.
Coming in and running a country, one of the most important skills you can have is negotiation. And something that Hillary Clinton is very good at, and something that I think you'll see most establishment candidates, with the exception of ones that are notoriously bad at it, like Ted Cruz, they can come in, they can talk to people, and they can at least convince some people to agree with them.
Well, Ted Cruz claims to be anti-establishment.
He's an interesting mix. I mean, and what's most shocking, if you've heard any of what Republicans had said up until this point in time, is that the vitriol in the Republican Party that existed for Ted Cruz is insane. And a lot of people were backing Trump before they backed Cruz, and now you see that starting to reverse miraculously.
Though Trump still has quite a strong hold on the Republican Party.
Seemingly. You always hear a lot of pundits talking about the fact that, this isn't the party, this is, some fringe demographic. This is it seems almost inevitable. I mean, in my personal opinion.
Yeah,
occurring.
I agree with you.
Meaning
his rise, given the demographic of what the Republican Party's kind of
become
mantra attracts. Yeah.
I will come out honestly and say I don't think Rubio's going to win Florida.
No, he's definitely not.
I don't think he can pull. Florida is a fascinating state because there's a massive Cuban population that is incredibly conservative. And so even though you wouldn't expect such a strongly Hispanic state to support someone like Donald Trump, it's pretty, the numbers, they speak for themselves, which I think is incredibly concerning, first of all. But it's an interesting statistic.
In only the way a northerner can say it, I expect that much from Florida. I mean,
true.
It's unnerving, but it's easy to see why he's appealing. despite, and it's this weird sort of vortex of mendacity right now because he lies so frequently that now it's gotten to the point where if he lies, half the people supporting him say, no, he didn't lie, and the people who know he's lying say, well, that's Trump for you. And he gets away. It's scot-free. It's almost like there's so much volume of lie that he's putting out per minute that you can't catch one because he's trying to catch all of them.
Incredibly interesting thing that I saw was the Bernie finger wag generated so much controversy online.
Oh, yeah.
And he was so condemned, and people went, oh, that's so rude. And you don't even need to dig into he was interrupted while he was speaking, and he said, oh, no, I'm not done yet. But look at the other side. You know, Republican debates, you're talking about your genitals, you're talking...
Well, it quickly devolves into
talking
a
about
conversation
sweating.
at a 6th grade lunch table.
Now,
everyone's yelling, people are physically touching each other.
And that's an important distinction, too. I mean, I think also there's some sort of a current of... You know, Hillary's a very interesting candidate because she is a woman. And whether or not that should be some sort of a criterion that you're considering, you know, it is. It's something that you have to grapple with whether you think it should matter or you shouldn't. Because people certainly bring it up. And I've heard tons of my conservative friends say things like, anytime somebody says they're supporting Hillary, they say, you know, you shouldn't just vote for her because she's a woman. That's not a good reason. And I don't know. I don't know. What do you think about that? The fact that she's a woman and how that plays into this race.
Well, as much as you'd like to look at it as a non-issue, it definitely is, and it definitely plays up sexism on either side. Being, I'm going to vote for her because she's a woman, or you're only voting for her because she's a woman. And it's definitely created an interesting dynamic in this election because, I mean, Carly Fiorina aside, she is the only legitimate woman who has ever made it this far, and she's done it twice.
Yeah, now Carly Fiorina is out, if I'm correct, and she's endorsed Ted Cruz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, somebody can fact check me on that.
Speaking of endorsements,
I'm pretty sure you're right.
How about Dr. Ben
Bush
Carson
endorsing?
I was talking Jeb Bush endorsing Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's one of the most fascinating things to me
because they clash so much.
You can when someone that hasn't been involved at all endorses Trump, you know, even Chris Christie, like that was a surprise when Chris Christie stepped, but people that Trump directly bashed on the stage, and they just come up like lapdogs.
I mean, it's just like, it's typical party building, though, as someone sews up the nomination. Yeah. Like, 2008, Obama and Hillary were insane, way more aggressive to each other than Bernie and Hillary in this election. But in the end, she came up, endorsed him, rallied her supporters behind him. So, I mean, it's just good politics on their part.
But how do you talk about the discrepancy between that and the traditional Republican Party? So people like John McCain, people like Mitt Romney, who have openly come out, even younger people like Paul Ryan coming out and saying, no,
see,
stop him.
It's an interest. I think it's an eternal debate within the parties and an eternal debate for all of politics as to whether or not you need to vote your conscience and you need to vote based on some sort of ideology and based on some sort of personal code of integrity, whatever you want to call it, or you vote for results. You vote for practicality. A classic example was Nader in the Green Party. You know, during the 2000 election, whether or not, you know, in retrospect, it's easy to say that he stole it from Gore. You know, that if people had been more party conscious, regardless of what he was saying or how much they liked what Nader was saying, they should have realized there was no chance he would be elected and that they're throwing away their votes. And that's hard to decide whether or not. And that's a debate I'm having, especially regarding Bernie and Hillary. And I think that the application is fairly obvious. I think Hillary is far more electable, but I think Bernie is the better person. And
so for you, it's an issue on practicality, not necessarily who you agree with.
I think it is, and that might sound like a weak argument.
Well, not necessarily.
It's a lot of argument that a lot of the Democrats are debating. Most people I talk to, it comes down to that.
Yeah.
Well, what I will say about that, and to be clear, my previous statements about Governor Kasich, I in no way am someone that goes, well, if Hillary gets nominated, there is no way that I'm voting. No, I'm voting for Hillary Clinton if she's the Democratic nomination. What it boils down to for me is, at this point, even though Kasich doesn't have any chance, he hopefully will win Ohio, but I don't think that
He's
it makes any
projected
sense.
to win Florida right now.
Is he really?
Who has him winning Florida?
But
No.
No, Ohio. Never mind. I don't know what I was talking about. He's definitely projected to win Ohio.
But
except for one source has Trump winning, and then one source has CBS has him tying Trump.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, though, Hillary Clinton to me, it's just I like the push that has been happening where she's sort of touted herself as an extension of the Obama administration.
Mm-hmm.
On that regard, that makes sense. Voting for her makes sense. I think that was a really good political move. Having said that, though, if it's an extension of the foreign policy that she had under the Obama administration, it's a really dangerous line. And this is a tumultuous time to come in with that sort of gentle, like, don't do that sort of approach to what's going
that's
on.
That's obviously kind of just a play on even people like us who I believe last episode the three of us joked about the best course of action for the nation might just be a third term from Obama. I mean, that's definitely not. I don't think she meant that as literally as people are. Taking it.
No, there. I think differences, how distinct some of them are, can be questioned, because that when it boils down to it, that's my biggest problem with Hillary. At this point, even after she's been campaigning for years before anybody else was, I still can't tell you what she stands for on a lot of... I can't tell you the driving force in this campaign.
I think the crux of understanding Hillary Clinton, especially from a Democrat's perspective, and this is just my interpretation, is that people have a problem with her because she's doing the right thing from a Democratic standpoint for perhaps the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And the wrong reasons being she doesn't really wholeheartedly believe what she's saying, but she knows it is popular for a large majority of Americans. I shouldn't say large majority anymore. It's popular for a large majority of Democrats, certainly. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why I like Hillary so much is because I have faith in her as an executive. I have faith in her as somebody who's willing to take charge and as somebody who is willing to be very thoughtful about the policies that are put into motion. And I just remembered seeing something, I think it might have been on Reddit or something like that, and it was a comparison during the last Democratic debate, of what Hillary and what Bernie responded to regarding Flint. Mm-hmm. And I saw that. And so there's a lot of talk about Flint, and then there was also some talk about fracking, if I'm not mistaken. And in regards to fracking, there was also an interesting kind of a discussion. Mm. And Hillary said something along this, and this was meant to be a very pro-Bernie sort of a post. And it said, Hillary stated, there's a transcript, something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, there are 3 specific things that we need to watch out for when fracking, what certain chemicals are using, make sure that we're rigorously testing the chemicals and backing up that we know how they are implementing the fracking and knowing where the runoff is going. And if they complete criteria X, Y, and Z, then they're green-lighted. But trust me, guys, that's probably not going to happen. These are very strict criteria. And then Bernie says, do you support fracking? Or he's asked, do you support fracking?
Yeah, and
he says, no.
He said, no, I do not support fracking.
And people take that as, I think, as a very pro... it's pro-Bernie logic. Mm-hmm. It should be a simple moral decision. Mm-hmm. But on my behalf, I actually like that. I like that about Hillary Clinton. I think you need a nerd. I think you need somebody who's really very particular about issues. And I think you get into trouble with the black and the white, the yes or the no. Mm-hmm. I think I liked her parsing that down to this, because you have to know things about it to be that specific.
No, Jake,
it's important.
I do have a question for you. As far as backtracking a little bit, you said you had faith in Clinton as a leader and as an executive. Yeah. Do you think that boils down to the fact that she's had experience? Or do you think that boils down to just the fact that she seems more suited for a position like that?
I tried to be wary of the seems, seems like this, seems like that. Often I thought to myself, when you hear these debates and they're asking very personal questions like, what's your personal take on Christianity, and what's your favorite type of music was even a part of one debate for the Republican. I don't want to date the person. I want to know what their policies are.
Yeah.
So when they're talking about likability, it's a shame that comes into play. I mean, you could make the argument that somebody's likability and their natural charisma is going to impact how they interact with other world leaders.
Well, that's what I mean for George W. Bush. It was like a guy you want to share a beer with, and that was a big thing that they actually campaigned on.
Yeah.
A guy you can relate to, average guy.
You're electing your next door neighbor.
You don't want an average person as the president of the United States.
Precisely.
Exactly.
Well, and I see what you're saying, but because of that, she almost has that Ted Cruz sort of feel, though. And what concerns me is I'd hate to see someone get into the presidency that there already are preconceived notions against. People already have these ideas, especially in Congress, that we will not support her. We will just filibuster the bejesus out of this entire
So in a sense,
presidency.
it boils down to her experience is both a pro and a con. Because obviously she's already demonstrated that she can lead, and she's also demonstrated that a lot of people don't like her.
Yeah, and I think for the wrong reasons. I think because she's not, as much as she tries, and I think that's part of the reason, I think she tries too hard, she's not likable. She comes across as very defensive, very abrasive, and those aren't good reasons to reject a candidate, honestly, unless you're really thinking about that one-on-one meeting with Vladimir Putin or something, which means that might even be desirable. But I think those are the wrong reasons. But just that gut feeling is so huge in how people vote, and that's what rubs them the wrong way with Hillary. She's not very likable. And from Bernie's standpoint, he's a man of his word. He's always had this core set of beliefs throughout his life. He clearly cares about what he's saying. He's doing the right thing for the right reason, arguably, and he believes it. My skepticism with Bernie is A, electability, in the sense that could he... I know what the polls say. The polls say that he's actually beating a lot of these Republicans one-on-one in a national race. But I don't know if I
Hillary
trust
was also
that.
beating in a national race.
Yeah. Well, Hillary, last I saw, was only beating Trump in a national race by a slim margin, and everybody else she was losing to.
Really?
Yeah. And that could have changed. This was about a week ago, I think I saw that. And that's actually a big rallying point for Bernie's campaign right now, is saying that, look, in a general, we really do fare better.
Do you know who those polls are
campaign.
from? Because that could definitely have something to do
Well,
with it.
Quinnipiac does a lot of polls.
Yeah,
And I've been following those, and it's been interesting because they've been fluctuating in a way that I think is pretty unprecedented, where throughout this, I mean, people go up and down in crazy different varieties. So I that definitely shows how public this election is.
I think this was a CNN / some ORC something poll. I forget what the letters are.
Kind of caters to the left, though. So.
Maybe. CNN, I think, tries to toe the line.
I'd be really interested to see how Hillary especially will perform with moderates. Because a lot of even Democrats don't like her. And
that's what this election is turning into. There are so many candidates with so many really divisive qualities and stances, even between Bernie and Hillary, I would argue, that you're either voting for the party and you're voting for practicality, or you're voting for idealism and a totally different way of doing things. I think that's the choice a lot of people are currently making. And now you're totally pro Hillary, right?
Yeah.
Jack? Yeah. I want to speak on that?
I originally was thinking Bernie because of the left, very progressive principles, but then again I looked at it and just experience-wise, Bernie is kind of like the Ted Cruz of the left. Like he goes into Congress, he votes against things that have been agreed upon by both parties. They're the best you're going to get. There's no way you're going to get a deal better than this, and he goes and votes against them just to be that guy. And that's not the type of thing we need. The type of person we need in the presidency. Hillary's going to go in there and say, all right, this is what I believe, but it's not going to happen. So we're going to try and get you this instead.
Now, I read something very interesting about this, and there have been articles from numerous publications saying Hillary's the most electable, obviously, and then some surprisingly saying, no, Bernie's actually more electable. I read something, I think it was called The Case for Bernie Sanders, or maybe The Case for Bernie, an Atlantic Monthly article, and it was very enlightening. And the stance that they took, and I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on this, Jack, being somebody who's very pro-Hillary, is that if you come to the negotiating table with an idea of moderation and of already watering down your stances, you're not going to get as far as you are if you walk in and you haggle a little bit more, and you'll drop down, but drop down to something that's ultimately, in Bernie's case, certainly more liberal, and even more so, I think, where Hillary starts to fall flat in that idea of, she's more moderate, she's going to be able to get things done, liberal things, and in moderation, she knows how to work through it, is that Obama, look at Obama's presidency. Obama he's compromised a lot. So much. And that's trust me, I love Obama. I really think he's one of our most admirable presidents. But the consensus, even from a lot of hardcore Democrats, is that he's not doing his job, and that he's compromised too much, he's acting a lot like a Republican, and in all fairness, he has made a lot of concessions, which I think are totally appropriate.
Isn't that his job, though?
It's his job, but you see what happens is that he makes the concessions, and he's still being stonewalled. I guess the idealistic.
Well, that's more of like a stonewall on principle. That's you're a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm going to shut this down.
I don't know. I think there's a race that race plays an aspect into it. Plays a part in it. I don't know what it is, but all I do know is that we had somebody in the White House for 8 years. They really tried to compromise, and that didn't get us too far. So if Hillary's coming in with this idea of she's going to enact compromise, I don't know if that's going to be successful. I don't know if a different approach, especially from somebody who believes in what they're saying, might be more successful.
I don't know. I debate that Obama's compromise hasn't gotten that far, because if you look at the Affordable Care Act, it originally was proposed with a plan for Medicare for all, or just a universal single-payer health care plan was in the first draft, and then Republicans were like, no. So they left it out, and they formed this new one, which was certainly watered down, which is the best we're going to get. And then you look at Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed without any compromise. They simply repealed it. So I think Obama's moderate approach went in there and got things done that, like, if Bernie was president, we wouldn't, in 2008, we wouldn't have the Affordable Care and Patient Protection Act at all.
Well, one thing I would say...
Speculation, yeah.
I would argue that history shows that to be successful, and success is a term that itself can be debated, what successful means. Does that mean working effectively with the other side, or does that mean, listening to other ideas, or does it mean getting done what you want to get done? And I think in his first term, you saw President Obama came in as a relatively aggressive young president, and he really pushed a lot of things. And so I would say that history shows the aggressor gets more done. And that itself may be an illusion. It may only appear because they came in saying things. But what definitely worries me about Hillary, and even Kasich by the same token, and not that he really has any chance of ever getting to this point, but
he's hoping himself.
he will not give up. I think, small side note, I think he may have been running this full intent to be a vice presidential candidate.
He wins Ohio.
He's really been grooming this quite well, and that's
what it looked like Christie was doing. That's all.
There's also speculation that's what Fiorina was doing. That's why speculation. That's why she endorsed Ted Cruz.
That'd be an odd vice presidential pick.
Carly Fiorina, that would ruin him.
Just as
get your passports handy.
Yeah, really.
But
I
would say
talking, and there was the. Sorry, Tyler, go ahead.
Just, I think Bernie. A reason he does well in the polls, and the reason that he might even come in as a more viable candidate, is he has a lot of passion, a lot of drive, and that definitely speaks to just the humanity of it.
And what's furthermore interesting about that, though, is you would think, especially given what you see videos or photos, it's really quite poignant. His interactions with the civil rights movement when he was a young man are extraordinarily impressive. And what's interesting, really interesting, is that in the South, especially, it's not even really a case for young African American and minority voters. Almost across the board, your African American and minority voters in the South are for Hillary.
Yeah.
Fairly overwhelmingly.
And
which is interesting.
even more interesting, Hillary is winning like crazy in the South, but she's winning Republican voting states, and that's something that I it doesn't seem to get played up as much. But that's the fact of the matter is she's winning the states that are going to vote Republican. And so from a nomination standpoint,
that's
I
a
think
good point,
the Democratic Party has to look at that and go, I mean, it looks good now, but can she win it?
Hillary's had the superdelegates in her back pocket since this began.
Oh, yeah.
And Bernie could kick and scream if it got pretty even towards the end. But if that doesn't shift and there's no change in mindset there, it's almost a done deal.
Yeah.
Already.
I think a lot of people kind of just expect it to be a done deal anyway. Like, I know even a lot of Bernie supporters are saying, yes, I support Bernie, but I know Hillary's probably going to get the nomination. Like, a lot of people, and a lot of Republicans especially, are already looking at it as a done deal.
I mean, I'd argue that it's over right now, yeah, but...
All right, well, I didn't want to have to do it, but enough stuff has happened in the last week. Let's talk about Donald.
Again.
So, I read two very, very interesting articles. And the first one I'd like to touch on is he is winning in states that have substantially high percentages of minorities. And that definitely is hand in hand with the sort of race card. Because as we just saw, I mean, his rallies are starting to turn into concerning. There's acts of violence at most large rallies, and he just
Very scary.
He just said John McGraw, who sucker punched a protester, a black protester. Trump just came out and said that he's considering paying the legal fees of Mr. McGraw, which is...
Are there going to be any legal fees?
I believe
he was arrested for assault, so...
I know immediately after there was nothing.
That's that in hand with the idea that, you know, he's winning places where where education is low, first of all. He's winning the uneducated white vote, which is in an increasing number of people. And we touched on this last week with saying, you know, he's pulling out people that otherwise wouldn't vote. In the same way that Bernie is pulling in young people, and all of a sudden the 18 to 25-year-old vote matters on both sides. Trump is pulling out the uneducated. He's pulling out the racists. And that's terrifying.
And this is another huge debate, I think, for all of democracy. Huge debate. for not just Democrats or Republicans, but for the entire American political process. I have friends who are liberal people and say things along the lines of I've had teachers, I think Mac knows. I've had teachers who said this to me something along the lines of, we should definitely test voters, you know, because it's a problem that they're uneducated, and on the face of it, that seems like, for somebody who really likes politics, that seems like something that you would appreciate or you'd like. You're like, yeah, people should know what they're doing before they vote. They should be able to prove that. But it's a slippery slope into the voter ID laws, and all this goes to show you is that it restricts people from entering the democratic process. Any restriction, in my mind, no matter how maybe noble it seems, you know, is ultimately devastating, I think, to the principles of democracy in this country. Anytime you say, we need only the educated people to vote, we need only this people to vote, it should be true. We should have educated people voting. But I think the moment you start to take a stance, it's a slippery slope. The moment you start to take a stance along the lines of, well, these people should be tested, or that's when you start inhibiting people. And even if the country should be that way, then it's no longer a democracy when you start restricting people. It's
concerning because it's been used in the past. And so you definitely, the obvious but incredibly difficult to accomplish push would be to fix the education system.
Yeah,
Because a country like the United
Common
States,
Core, right?
it should have a higher literacy rate, and it doesn't, and that's pretty astounding. I mean, it's
Our
you would
educational
expect it.
system, I think, needs to start reflecting. Now, a lot of what Bernie has said about his idea of free college is something I don't necessarily agree with.
yeah.
I think the problem in this country is that we're essentially devaluing college educations, and I don't think people need to be educated, yes, but I think the best way to tackle the educational deficit, or whatever you want to call it, the attainment gap that would be achieved by education, is that we need to make not going to college totally acceptable, and we need to really adequately and thoroughly prepare people in high schools so that they don't need to go to college, because it's a huge expense, and a lot of people don't walk away with degrees that are useful. And moreover, there are a lot of colleges are for-profit places, and for the most part, a lot of people aren't being benefited by it. And I don't think the solution to that is saying, well, let's make it free, so it's not really the expense is going to land somewhere.
Well, what I'd add on top of that is, first of all, you make college free, then everybody's going to need a doctorate. Because pretty much everybody already needs a master's to be competitive in a field. An important thing about high demand fields and high intellect fields is they look for the best of the best. And that's what part of what makes college an important thing, because there are definitely, there are differences between going to an Ivy and going to a community college. But they, at the same time, and I just pulled up this statistic, the literacy rate hasn't gone up in 10 years. But a college education has just exploded in value. And so it's an unfortunate thing that we probably should save a big talk for another episode.
Yeah.
But just to touch on that, Trump is getting the uneducated votes, and that's a concern. It's a big concern.
Yeah, I mean, the number one, just to confirm what you said, the number one voting group for Trump is white men without college degrees, by percentage the highest group supporting Trump.
Now, does it shock anyone else that there's a fair amount of young people who are very excited about Donald Trump?
Yes.
It seems like the younger generations tend to be fairly liberal, but
When they're not.
even in Connecticut, even in generally a very blue state, there are quite a few kids our age, even younger, who are very excited about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is a very clever person. He's a very clever candidate. And he is so dangerous because of that. If you are inclined not to think critically about things, and if you're inclined to bend to sentiment or nostalgia, or to not play the devil's advocate in your own life as much as possible, then Trump is very appealing, because Trump is promising a lot, and he sounds confident, and he doesn't take flack from anyone, and the promises he makes are grandiose, and they don't seem feasible to somebody who might think about it. I don't think any of them sound feasible, but they really prey on this sort of nationalistic tendency in the United States that's very scary. And people love him because he is uncensored. And kids probably like him because he's uncensored.
Crude almost.
Crude, yeah. He's funny too. He's a character. He's entertaining. As somebody who I would describe myself as very liberal, he's entertaining to watch. I'd rather see him on a talk show than I would want to see Hillary Clinton. And that's what
But
draws
Hillary
in
Clinton running the United States, not Donald Trump.
precisely.
Well, James Fallows from The Atlantic has a great quote where essentially he said, I've analyzed pretty much every Trump speech from this election. And I quote exactly, "I've now been through dozens of interviews with Trump with a variety of interviewers, and I have never not once heard him discuss anything, any subject of any kind, with any evidence of knowledge, never mind thought. None, zero. He's like skipping a stone over a pond. He doesn't even come close to the level of dilettante." And you know what? When it comes to young people, and I think for us, we definitely see young people now through social media, But I would say this probably has always been true with this sort of personality. People like to hear what's there. It's easy to take one fact.
Facts are boring.
And just have it go out your head. So by the time you get to the next speech, it's just, as long as the person saying it you like, the consistency doesn't matter that much. He says it in the same way. He gives that rhetoric of power where people listen, and he really pushes things, and he pushes things into the ground. But where in the past, politicians have been able to really beat things down into the ground, he doesn't get boring, because even though he does that, it's on different things and never in any real depth. So we've reached about our point, I think, for today. I leave once again feeling shaken and terrified for the future of the nation. But luckily, Mr. Nacetta here has been relatively successful in working on his job application.
Before we leave, do we want to take this quiz?
Let's
So we have a quiz. If you want, you can take it. BernieVsHillary.org. And it's a 10-question quiz that should supposedly point you in the right direction if you are undecided. So it does give you a choice to kind of highlight the issues that matter most to you, or we can just get started. So would you guys rather go through this seemingly tedious process, or just
let's just go. Let's try it.
All right. So the first question is: do you support marriage equality for gay and lesbian couples?
Yes.
Don't both candidates support? I don't get it. It's
Yeah,
not going to point you in any direction.
It's. Yes. I have a feeling it's going to end up being Hillary, but.
All right. So are we all yes on that?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Do you support the Patriot Act, which permits the secret surveillance of U.S. citizens without court oversight?
Well, it can be debated that's without court oversight.
I'll say for
there is FISA court oversight.
I'll say for this discussion, no.
I would also say no, just because the Patriot Act, although I think well intentioned, and it came at a point in time where it seemed important, it's one of those documents that's written to be very open to abuse. So I would say no.
And then Jack, fine.
I can't be sure. I'm gonna vote yes. Just keep it.
All right, I'm gonna say no. So it's 3 against 1.
What?
Yeah, I think if anything, history is an indication of how despotic societies and dictatorships arise when there's a lot of fear and legislation that gives you unparalleled control. I don't know. It seems like a common historical pattern to me. That's what makes me wary.
So the third question is: do you believe that marijuana should be decriminalized at the federal level?
No.
Yes. And furthermore, if there's a question on the war on drugs, to be terminated as well.
Yes. And for just looking at it purely economically, yes, Colorado made, I think Denver alone made $32 million in the first weekend. And for certain states, I mean, that's a lot of money. A lot of states in the country are in debt to the federal government right now. So if you want to talk just sheerly sales tax,
for all you straight-laced libertarians out there, I think it should probably be a pretty libertarian line of thought to say that we shouldn't be criminalizing any substance if you want to use it.
Yeah.
But that's just a little note of hypocrisy that may or may not ring true to people.
Okay, so this one's pretty interesting because both candidates actually have the same view on this. Do you support the Keystone XL pipeline, which would carry emissions-heavy oil from Canada to U.S. refineries?
No.
All right, that
doesn't make sense.
Now.
The plans are incredibly inefficient.
In case you thought there were any Republicans among us.
I'm a Republican.
Not based on this quiz.
5 is: do you believe that women should have a legal right to equal pay for equal work? I think we're all on the same page. Okay. Do you believe in a European-style or single-payer healthcare system that would guarantee universal coverage for all Americans? No. I'm going to just tee this off and say yes.
No.
I'm wary of it. I
think it lowers the quality of healthcare.
Well,
healthcare is ridiculously expensive in this country, but it's amazing quality if you can.
Actually, I recently, and I don't have any. So I openly admit I don't have any facts to support me right now. But I did read something recently. I was looking up. I think it was a YouTube video or something that said America's quality of healthcare is actually average.
Yeah.
And that there are some countries that have single payer that are above, some below, but it's
So it depends on execution.
And you know what I would say? It's awful on doctors in this country, but unfortunately this gets factored in. We look at countries like Sweden, like Canada, and we go, oh, that's so many more taxes, it's ridiculous, et cetera, et cetera. But the United States, we spend 17% of our GDP on healthcare, on a healthcare system that is not all-inclusive. In a country like Canada, 11% of their gross domestic product goes to healthcare, for superior healthcare, and for cheap and accessible healthcare. So, again, from just a purely economic standpoint, you have to look at that and go, it's like having Microsoft on its own and being able to push through all these things before other regulations came through. So I would say yes for that.
Yeah, I think we could do an entire discussion about this. And I think we should actually, because it's very important and it's complicated, and people tend to shy away from that.
Yeah.
Especially people our age. I think even if they're interested in the social things, I think a lot of the problems and a lot of the expenditures that you see even in the Affordable Care Act is due to what is essentially a lot of leverage that private companies have over bargaining with people who want to be insured, and that's where you start to see some of the bills happen. So I'm going to say no just for this.
You're going to say no, so we're split. So I'm going to go ahead and say no.
Okay.
Because I think the last one we were split on, I said yes.
I think that pushed us towards Hillary. But.
Do you think that work should be taxed at a higher rate than investment?
No. Wait, work?
Meaning
investment should
money
be
you
taxed.
make.
Investment should be taxed at a higher rate.
So, no.
Yeah, I would
yes.
also say
Capital gains, yes. I
I'd
think
say
should be
yes.
higher.
I err on the side of capital gains as well. Taxing
Also, I'm not. I think that's what capital gains is. If there's anybody listening,
that's when you hit the gym.
Yeah,
Get those mad capital gains.
Do you agree with Congress's 2002 decision to authorize the Iraq War?
No.
Okay, all on the same page.
How many questions do we have?
We are on 8 right now. There are 2 left.
Okay.
Do you support offshore drilling for oil in the Arctic and the Gulf of Mexico?
No.
Okay.
Even if global warming is false.
No. Do you support reinstating the Glass-Steagall Act, which would prevent high-risk trading with consumer bank deposits?
Yeah. Well,
I'm not especially educated on the subject, but
it
sounds like a yes.
I'm inclined to say yes, but I'll go with Tyler.
It prevents investment banks and consumer banks from being one. It was repealed by Bill Clinton in the 90s.
Essentially, the idea behind it.
From being you consume banks that take your money and hold it and protect your money and give out loans. Commercial banks can't be the same as banks who invest in CDOs and stuff.
Gotcha.
Generally, what it is you're separating the idea of commercial banks and investment banks.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually. So I'd agree.
In lieu of not knowing too much about it, I'll say yes.
Okay. So our results are, I don't understand this at all, but 79% Bernie Sanders and 53% Hillary Clinton. So a grand total of far over 100%.
No, I think,
we err more on the side of Bernie and Hillary.
Yeah. Interesting.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well,
except for Jack Nicetta, who erred almost 100% in favor of Hillary Clinton.
Lock, stock, and soundbite.
All right. Well, thank you, fellas. You can follow us on Twitter at PolidicsCast. And SoundCloud.com/politics.
YouTube.com/politics.
We're not partners yet, so we don't have an official URL. But we'll see you next time.